everyone, and welcome back to the third installment of me in this particular pajama shirt. This video is going to be about my April wrap-up. Again, a lot of the books that I read were in audiobook format, and I did manage to read 10 books despite having a literal exhibition to work on, and exams and graduation and all that, so I think I just managed to not put in all of my focus into my schoolwork and instead read as procrastination, but it's like a win-win situation. I mean, I'm not really mad about it, so that's fine. So we're gonna dig right in. The first book that I read in April was Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini. I don't actually remember the titles of these books, just because I'm not really all that invested in them. I gave Days of Blood and Starlight 3 out of 5 stars. This is the second installment in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. It is a star-crossed lover story about a girl who lives in Prague but helps out these fantasy chimera creatures in their endeavors, and her world kind of gets turned upside down when an angel, like biblical angel, turns up, and she starts to find something familiar about him, and like this kind of opens up their history and their past, and like, were they lovers, were they not, blah blah blah. And this is the second book continuing off what happened in the first book, obviously. I wasn't very invested in the first book anyways, and I just found this in audiobook format and I thought I'd give it a go. It wasn't too much better or too much worse than the first book. I will say that it did not talk about the main romance at all, so I was pretty stoked about that. I really enjoyed the world building that happened and the exploration into the very strange system of magic that exists, so that was really interesting. I love this idea of the contrast between like pure biblical creatures versus hybrids, to say the least, and like this race war thing that's going on. I'm liking that, and I'm very much loving the political aspects infused in it, but it's still like weirdly tipping towards a romance, even though this book wasn't so much about the romance. Trigger warnings for this book, big time. So the trigger warnings are rape and sexual assault, post-traumatic stress disorder, kind of, gore, physical assault, grief and loss of a loved ones, and that's it. Or that's all that I could, pick up on as I was on audiobook and didn't have anything to like tab it. Not the best read, not the worst read. I do get the hype about the series though, because Laini Taylor's writing is exceptional. Her way with words is masterful. It's well written. It's just not up my alley. Next book that I read in April was Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I'm a huge fan of mysteries. So this book is about Ellingham Academy. The founder of this academy and his family got kidnapped and murdered early on when the school was set up, and the mystery still remains unsolved to this date. And our main character, Stevie, who is a huge buff of mysteries and crime and murders, wants to solve it. Stephenie manages to be one of the few people that gets let into this prestigious academy, and as her graduating project, she wants to be the first one to solve this mystery. I really, really loved it. Like, I've never read a Maureen Johnson book before, but this book was exceptional, and I feel like it reignited my love for mysteries. I immediately started reading Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle, and got turned off right away. So I think it's just a Maureen Johnson thing that like has got me hooked back into mystery, but it has to be her. The writing is just so perfect. It feels like a cozy mystery, but it's really like not a cozy mystery because it's straight up murder. The main characters, she's a little bit difficult in terms of like interacting socially, and she has a hard time herself coming across as interested about people's lives and just, wanting to talk, and like her character development and opening up to people, even in this one book. I know there's going to be multiple, but like what we've gotten here in this first book is just so cute and so encouraging. Like, I admire what Maureen Johnson has done with this. Like, if I ever were to write a book, I'd want to write a mystery like Maureen Johnson's. Like, that's how good it was. It's one of my new favorite books now. I read it in audiobook, but I'm definitely going to purchase the hard copy and immediately purchase the second hard copy the day the pre-order campaign goes up. It is so good and so yummy and just a good book. Next book that I read in April was Dublin by Julie Murphy. I gave it 3.5-ish stars. That sounds about right. 4 out of 5 stars also sounds about right, but it's like on the lower end. Trigger warnings for fatphobic language, occasionally towing the line of misgendering drag queens. I'm reading my Goodreads review right now. And a lot of body image issues. I liked the book. So Dublin is about a young girl named Willow Dean who's living in like a small town in Texas, I think. She's a high schooler, and she's loud and proud about her fat body. Almost verbatim from the Goodreads. And her life kind of gets like a little turned upside down in terms of how confident she is about herself when the hot guy she's crushing on actually seems to like her back. And so to reclaim her sense of self and her love for her own self, she enters the prestigious pageant in her local town, something she's never been encouraged to do by anyone in her life. And so this is her breaking out into the world and trying to, break down the body norms for women. It was a really good book in terms of critiquing this idea of what beauty means in society, in terms of being a book of confidence and coming into oneself for fat girls, and about friendship in general. It was just so cute. The romance was certainly not the focus of the book. It was very much about Willow Dean's self-confidence and her relationship with her best friend. It was good. It was really good. It just, there wasn't that, like, instant spark with me in the book itself. Like, I think the writing, and the main characters, like, persona were a little bit hard to, like, meld with, but all of her internal struggles were so honest and so genuine and very, like, relatable, and I really liked it. Julie Murphy's writing overall is blunt, and I like that, but I think this book definitely needed, like, a little bit more in terms of blending that bluntness with the blunt personality of the main character. I think there was, like, a little bit of dissonance over there is the only reason it didn't, really touch me the way it would have. But it's a good book overall, and I would recommend reading it. It's fun, and her second book is coming out in the same series. I guess it's a companion novel called Put In, and it's about 2 side characters in Dublin. The next book that I read in April, or finished in April, was Arusha and the End of Time. I actually started this when I got the ARC in January. I wanted to finish it before the publication date, but I never got around to doing that because I love this book so much, and I did not want it to end. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I mean, it could be a bit more of like a 4.75 stars out of 5 stars, but Roshni Chokshi is the light of my life, and I will buy, without question, every single one of her books. This is a story about a 11-year-old named Arusha who lives in, I guess, the upper floors of the Indian Art Museum with her mother, single mother, and Aru's a pathological liar, just because she wants to fit in. And one day she tells this lie to her friends about a cursed lamp, and they dare her to touch it. Not touch it, they dare her to light it, and she does, and it unleashes this big bad shadow monster from the Hindu mythology, and she has to deal with the consequences of that. So this story is based off the tale of the Pandavas. As Indian as I am, I'm still very murky about my Indian mythology. I think, the story of the Pandavas is the story of the Mahabharata. Yeah, I think that's right. And it's this epic tale that involves like hundreds of thousands of gods and a bunch of demigods, and it's huge, and it's got a lot of like live action versus cartoon adaptations, and this is like a gender bent story of that, and she's doing a bang up job of like putting this out into the world. Roshni Chokshi's writing is otherworldly. She writes this flowery writing that I'm very familiar with, because a lot of Indian authors I feel like tend to write in that same style. The same way I feel like magical realism authors also have the same stylistic way of writing. So it feels like home. Like, her writing style is like a warm hug welcoming me back home, and that's just, it makes me tear up sometimes. Like, there were literally 10 pages into this book, like, I had to like wipe my face because I was damp from crying. Like, do you know how much this book would have meant to me if I, as an 11-year-old, would have read this? Actually, no, if I was a 13-year-old here in America for the first time ever and reading something like this. I tried so hard to fit in, and a lot of the things that Aru did at the age of 11, I did at the age of 13 and 15, and like, wow, the validation that this book would have provided me is astounding. So this is under Rick Riordan's imprint from Disney Hyperion. Rick Riordan Presents, and he's doing a lot of the non-Western mythology things written by authors from that same culture. So he's got The Storm Runner, which is based off of the Maya gods, although a lot of his summaries do say Mayan gods, which is culturally incorrect, I think, but I'm not, like, my focus in art history is not Maya and pre-Columbian art, so I can't really say. I just hope the author knows what's up when calling, like, Maya gods, Maya people. Anyways, and then there's also another book in the vein of, I think, Korean gods and mythology, and that's like a sci-fi thing, I think. I might be wrong, but I will link the website down below, which describes all 3 of the series that Rick Riordan is editing. So I'm just really stoked about all of these books. I am super pumped to get the next book in this. I actually need to get the proper hardcover of this book as well. But this is my first ever ARC I received in a giveaway. So I love it very much, and I'm never gonna part with it. The next book that I read in April was Cara by Stephenie Garber. Yes, that's right. This book is about, what's her name? This book is about a young girl named Scarlett who has dreamt and loved of participating and attending this grand showcase called Caraval, and she's been writing letters to what's his name? She's been writing letters to the master of Caraval for her entire life, and she finally one day gets a response inviting her and her sister to witness the event. And things start to go south when she arrives and realizes that her sister was kidnapped as part of the game of Caraval. And reality and game/fantasy start to blend together as she tries to save her sister and get out of this, like, surreal game alive and intact. I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. The trigger warnings that I have listed are suicide, murder, dismemberment and gore, assault and abusive relationships, and abusive parents. All of them are pretty hardcore, so beware. So this book certainly reads similar to what Roshni Chokshi's Crown of Wishes and Star-Touched Queen were like, in terms of like this magical, fantastical, fuzzy around the edges, like cloud-like storyline. And I like that kind of stuff. except for when the main characters come off as spineless and incompetent. She was pretty rough to get through, and even the romance, like the male character, the guy in this book, and like the romance was a little bit off kilter. It was pretty steamy. It was pretty, like, the angst and the attraction was there, but like there was something missing in the link between the two, and after a while I started wondering why these characters made the dumb decisions that they were making. So I liked it, I just didn't love it, and I don't know how interested I am in reading Legendary. Legendary is about Scarlet's sister, Tella, and I hated her perhaps the most, even though she wasn't really featured all that much in this story. Next book that I read in April was Ink Mistress by Audrey Coulter. A couple of trigger warnings for this book: a form of self-harm, emotional manipulation, claustrophobia. I think there's agoraphobia. I looked at the definition, it seems to match up, but only people with agoraphobia and who study it would know whether it actually is. There's also physical abuse and torture, and yeah, that's it. This book is about a demigod named Azra who, for all her life, has been told that she needs to stay away from humankind and civilization, because if they found out about her powers, she would be exploited. But she does live in the mountains and helps the village that is by her home as often as she can. Azra is in love with a local girl named Ina, and they've got this like romance thing going, but things start to get sour when Ina's village gets attacked and Ina gets consumed by this desire to get revenge and avenge her family and her villagers. Azra gets thrown into this wild political shebang where she has to try and fix the shit that Ina's wreaking upon the entire country, kingdom, but also, you know, try to like stave off more problems and keep her secret at the same time. So this book was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. The main character is bisexual, the love interest is lesbian. Audrey Coulter's queer women romance fantasy novels are literally my, lifeline. I love her writing. It is crisp, it is clean, and it is intriguing. Her stories are fascinating. The magic of the world definitely is a little of a background thing to the main romance of the story, but I don't really get to read queer women falling in love fantasy, so this is great. This is literally the best thing that could happen. And I'm okay with giving up. The high fantasy aspects of it to get, badass women dating each other and ruling the fantasy world. That's where it's at. So, something else that I really, really loved about this book is that there are so many just, casually gay people. In a lot of books that I've read, main characters are gay and everyone else is weirdly straight because the main characters are struggling to come out in a town or a place where queerness is looked down upon. Or, like Sarah J. Maas, there's one queer per book and then they get killed off at the end. I never really get a book full of gays. This was that one. This was everything I hoped for. The next book that I read in April was Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince by J.K. Rowling, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. No one expects any less from me. I'm not going to get too much into it because I already did review the 5th book in my last, do a wrap-up of the 5th book in my last wrap-up, and this is, no different. I will say that the 6th book is not one of my favorites. It's one of my, lesser favorites in the series. But I will say that Harry's character in this book drives a knife through my heart. It is painful to watch this poor boy suffer. The next book that I read in April was Retribution Royals by Aaron Bowman. This is the companion slash sequel novel to Vengeance Road, and it follows two new characters, Charlotte and Reese, and they are two unlikely companions who end up meeting due to a weird set of circumstances. Charlotte is a young girl who's run away from her family to try and become a journalist to prove, the men in the world wrong, that women can do a lot of things, and to, try and get her mom out of a rather difficult situation. Reese Murphy is a young boy who gets forced to join the Rose Riders, who are the big bad bandits from the last book, and he has gained this horrifying reputation because of acts associated with the Rose Riders and therefore associated with him, even though he didn't commit them. And so our two characters meet on a train where the Rose Riders are trying to rob everyone and, pull off this heist. And blah blah blah, things happen, and the two of them end up trying to escape their circumstances and using each other to meet their own ends. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The trigger warnings associated are blood and gore, attempted rape and rape mention, physical assault, and suicide. I don't know why I keep adding blood and gore into book trigger warnings, but I just feel like it needs to be there, even though you're not actually seeing blood and gore. It's just descriptive. It was pretty good. I feel like I did rate it higher than I should have. Now thinking back on it, I don't recall liking it enough to rate it a 4 stars, but I still rated it a 4 stars, so I'm gonna trust that. The way this book is written is in the voice of the characters, first person perspective, and it's using the diction and the language of this Wild West aesthetic. And it was difficult to read and understand this in Vengeance Road, but since I read Retribution Rails in audiobook, I ended up buying this later for $4, so steal. The audiobook actually helped clarify what was being said a lot more than Vengeance Road was in reading it with my own 2 eyes and listening to it in my head. The characters were fun and interesting, but not the best. They still felt a little bit more flat than the characters from Vengeance Road were, but the plot was really interesting. This conflict of 2 different people on 2 different roads somehow ending up together and fighting a battle and using each other was really fun to read, because they're both selfish characters and they're both trying to do the best for themselves, but they end up learning from each other and helping each other out, and that was really fun to watch that development. What was missing was the connection between the 2 characters. Obviously there's a romance, but it felt a little ingenuine, mainly because for so long they were using each other. The book overall was really fun to read, an audiobook especially, and I liked it. I just feel like this is another book about the Wild West that focuses on white people and not Native Americans. The last book had a Native American character, but it still felt like there was something unjustly done in that front, but I can't put my finger on it. Next book that I read in April was Leah and the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli, and I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I read this in the span of 4 hours and 40 minutes, and I stayed up till 4:40 a.m. reading this in one go. I loved this book. The book follows one of the side characters in Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. This is actually the sequel to that book, and it follows Leah Burke, who is anxiety-ridden young high school girl who's bisexual but only out to her mother and no one else. And she's starting to notice that her friend circle is beginning to crumble, and Leah is left floundering and unable to figure out how to fix things and, stitch them back together, because they're all leaving for college soon and she wants to have her friends around. Trigger warnings here are anxiety, racist microaggressions, fat shaming and fat shaming microaggressions. alcohol abuse, and a little bit of biphobia. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I'm going to reread this ASAP instantly, probably now. It is such a great book. It is so great. I did not really like Leah in Simon because we get Leah from Simon's perspective, but within the first 3 lines of this book, I was die hard for Leah. Like, I'm ready to put my life on the line for this beautiful bisexual queen. I can't take it. It is so cute. Leah's inner monologue is so relatable. Like, her anxieties and the way she talks about the way she feels is so close to what my own inner monologue is. So this definitely felt like someone was reading my brain. Would be invasive, but it felt so honest and genuine. And like, this is a completely different side to Leah, because what you're seeing is her own perception of herself, not Simon's perception of her or like a third character's perception of her. A refreshing book to read. And like, bisexual characters all over the place. Queer characters all over the goddamn place. Like I said with Mistress, it's one of the few books that casually get gay people all over. This is another one of them, but this is contemporary, so I feel like it's a little bit more common to have, you know, a smattering of gay across the board. I love those kinds of books. Becky Albertalli has across the board has this track record of having a diverse cast of characters, and this book again definitely did not disappoint. The narrative was just so sweet and cute, and the things that happened were just so adorable. Everyone has to read it ASAP right now. Go buy it right now. Right now. Do it. Turn off this video, go buy the book, and then come back and watch this. Last book that I read in April was Song of Blood and Stone by L. Penelope, or Leslie Penelope. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. It is a high fantasy, I think, about a young girl named Jasminda who is orphaned and living alone and is ostracized as a black girl with magic in a country of white people without magic. Her life kind of gets turned upside down when soldiers from the neighboring country come with a captive spy, and she manages to escape with him. This is also a dual perspective. You get the captor's perspective. His name is Jack, and he was serving as a spy in the other country and is trying to return home. So they run away together and get into this huge race against time to stop the true father, who's the ruler of the other country, from taking over the entire world and ruining everything. I've uploaded a full non-spoilery review for this. I was given an e-arc by the publisher to review, and I uploaded it very late. Either way, link will be down below, or in the, if I figure out how to use the little eye thing that happens up here. We'll see. Well, that is all I have for you in my April wrap-up. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you probably in like the end of like June or July or something, considering how often I upload. Thank you for being here, and see you later.